my message to the world is you're not as sick as you think you are. You're just deficient.
On this week's podcast, I had the distinct pleasure of hanging out with my good buddy, my new friend, Gary Brecka in Los Angeles. We got to talk about all kinds of cool stuff. We talk about fluoride. Is it actually a problem? Should you be filtering your drinking water? We talk about methylation, MTHFR, something that Gary has done an amazing job of bringing to the forefront again. A lot of people have done a good job of talking about methylation in the past, but Gary has piqued people's interest in this yet again. And so a lot of people are benefiting from thinking about their genetics. We talk about his health journey. We talk about his experience being a life insurance adjuster and what he learned looking at thousands and thousands of death claims and mortality data, which have informed the way that he thinks about things with his health company, which is called 10X Health. So enjoy this podcast with my friend Gary Brecka. It was a really fun one to do for me. And I think you guys will get a lot out of this that will probably change the way you live on a daily basis and will help you feel better and be healthier. So enjoy the podcast, guys. Gary Brecka.
Paul Saldino.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, brother.
I'm super pumped to be here,
Dude,
man.
It's great to meet you.
We did an entire podcast in the street before we got in here, and we're like, okay, let's just stop. Let's separate.
Stop talking to me.
Yeah, stop talking to me.
We're going to try and recreate most of that for you guys. But yeah. So I wanted to start with fluoride.
Fluoride, okay.
I think that whenever I talk about fluoride, people really are interested. I grew up drinking tap water. Mm-hmm. Didn't do my intelligence any good, probably. And I grew up with a mom who was a nurse and a dad who was a doctor, and we did a lot of things wrong, even in the medical family. But it's been so interesting as I've gone down this fluoride rabbit hole, and I've heard you talk about this. Yeah. So what do you think about drinking water?
Well, I mean,
fluoride,
I think before you even talk about fluoride, you got to talk about like, where does fluoride come from?
Right.
I mean, it's a byproduct of phosphate fertilizer production. Mm-hmm. It's called fluorosilicic acid. It also comes from the production of aluminum, and other metals. And fluorosilicic acid was the waste product from phosphate fertilizer production. So, and the reason why it was a waste product is they realized when they kept it in the fertilizer, it would burn the root and harm the plant. Mm-hmm. So they said, well, let's take the fluorosilicic acid out. But now we're making tons of fertilizer and we have this big pile of waste. So what are we going to do with the waste? And I don't know I haven't gotten to the genesis of who had the bright mind to say, hey, we'll sell it to these municipalities and we'll dump it in the drinking water, because there is marginal evidence that, can prevent tooth decay. Right. And some of that evidence is weak at best, forming a nanoparticulate layer over the tooth and marginally protecting the aluminum. But I think you get the same thing by brushing with hydroxyapatite or and just brushing your teeth. But and so they started to dump it into the municipalities. And what's really interesting is, the FDA kind of wants to have it both ways, right? So they put warning labels on toothpaste that say, for children, first of all, keep toothpaste out of the reach of children. That's warning labels on there, keep it out of the reach of children. And then they also put a warning on there that says if more than a pea-sized amount used for brushing the teeth is swallowed, to contact poison control immediately. And you can see this on the back of a warning label. If you have Crest or Colgate or another toothpaste brand that has fluoride, just go look at it. It's a required disclosure. It will be right on there, the contact poison control immediately if you, swallow more than the amount needed for brushing. But then when you start to say, well, how much is needed for brushing? What's the concentration of fluoride in a pea-sized amount versus the amount that I would get in 6-8 ounce glasses of water a day, which is what I'm supposed to be drinking. And when you realize it's 4 times the level, in water, if I drank the recommended number of glasses of tap water a day, why wouldn't I call poison control at the end of the day?
Everyone, call poison control.
Which brings me to one of my points that I bring up all the time. I mean, I get hammered all the time for talking about cyanocobalamin and other microdosing things that I believe that are cumulatively toxic to us, because lots of things are not toxic in single doses. And the prevailing wisdom is that the dosage determines the poison. And you hear a lot of people say that, they repeat it a lot. In the public domain. The truth is that's true for a lot of things, but very often it's the cumulative dosage that determines the poison. There's safe levels of mercury. There are safe, I'm saying, CDC, FDA levels of mercury. There's safe levels of fluoride. But the cumulative toxicity, I mean, nobody got mercury poisoning from eating one piece of tuna fish. Right? It had a safe level of mercury in it. But if they ate it every single day, the cumulative toxicity is what the problem is. And I think that fluoride is one of those things that permanently needs to be out of our life for good. It's a neurotoxic. The National Toxicology Program did a survey. I want to say, I don't want to misquote it, but it was about 3,600 municipalities in the United States. It was originally suppressed. They actually got it, the report released by court subpoena.
Suppressed.
Oh yeah, it was suppressed until March of last year.
Like so many good research findings that I'm sure we'll talk about on this podcast.
Yes. Yes. And they sued under the Freedom of Information Act, and it was released. And you can Google it, National Toxicology Program, fluoride. You're welcome to read the study. I want to say it was about 3,600 municipalities, 52 of 54 studies. They found an inverse relationship between IQ and fluoride concentration, especially in prepubescent teens.
Mm-hmm.
And so during the neurodevelopmental cycle of the brain, when it's very neuroplastic, these neurotoxins have significant detrimental effects. And we don't want to be the guys that are out there just fear-mongering, because that anytime you bring something up like that, they're like, well, now you think that everything kills you. No, I don't think that everything kills you. It's really about getting back to the basics, right? That's not how fluoride comes out of a glacier. I mean, that's not how water comes out of a glacier. And I really feel like we need to develop this kind of invisible barrier around ourselves and protect the temple, right? I mean, we have two choices. We can either filter things before they get to the temple, or we can let the temple be the filter. So you can drink tap water, and your body will filter out the chloride, the chlorine, the fluoride. It'll filter out the microplastics. It'll filter out the pharmaceuticals, the trace pharmaceuticals. But there's an expense to that.
Exactly.
Right? There's a cumulative cost to that. And so, as soon as you are able to afford water filtration, get a water filtration system. Do a 4-stage RO filter and add some mineral salts, Baja Gold sea salt or Celtic salt back to remineralize your waters. Really inexpensive things that you can do to take the environmental and toxic load off of the body and remineralize the body.
I'm here in LA, and one of the things I want to talk about is Brita filters, because Brita filters are bullshit. They don't get fluoride out of your water.
Oh, they don't?
It's very hard to get fluoride out of your water. Even a Berkey filter will not get fluoride out of the water unless you use their post filter, which then puts aluminum hydroxide into the water. Wow. Or aluminum oxide. So the Berkey won't even get fluoride. It's very hard to filter fluoride out.
4-stage RO will do it.
Unless you're doing reverse osmosis. Mm-hmm. So I want people to know this, that really, I think there are few better investments for your home or your apartment or your townhouse than a reverse osmosis filter.
I totally agree with you. I mean, I'm a psycho about filtering my water because I live in Miami, and the water comes into a condo unit. God knows where those pipes have been before it gets in there. But I filter it down to 0.1 micron, and I use something called an Echo water filter. I have one under the counter. I have a whole home filtration system because you're showering with all of that stuff. I did a really interesting post on Instagram the other day. Again, not trying to fearmonger people, but I just took 2 glasses of tap water because, interestingly, the hot water comes in one pipe in my house, and you actually can't filter the hot water. It doesn't come in cold and then go through a heater. It actually comes up from the boiler in the basement hot. So one side of the faucet's not filtered. And I filled 2 glasses of water. I just put them on the counter. And then I had my production manager, he was the guinea pig. I just had him hold 4 of his fingers in the water for 60 to 90 seconds. He just held his fingers in the water. And then he took his fingers out. And then I used chlorine drops. And I actually measured the amount of chlorine in each glass. Mm-hmm. And I think it was a big Perry Mason kind of ta-da moment for a lot of people, because one glass turned bright yellow, showing the presence of chlorine where he did not put his hand. The other glass, which was from the same tap, showed no chlorine, showing that in 60 seconds it went right transdermal. So the body absorbed that chlorine right out of the water. And so that's what I mean about, we can let our bodies be the filter, or we can filter it before our bodies. So right there before everybody's eyes, they were like, wow. And I go, now you're showering with that. You're drinking it. You're brushing your teeth with it. You're bathing in it. We're doing all kinds of things with this. You're washing your face with it in the mornings. And so I'm 100% with you on the water filtration.
And this is so important. I'm so glad you brought this up. I don't think a lot of us, myself included, until recently, think about showering and filtration and transdermal exposure to some of these toxins. Mm-hmm. I mean, great. Filter your water at your sink. Don't drink fluoride. Don't drink chlorine. Don't drink pharmaceuticals. Don't drink glyphosate. don't drink microplastics.
Right.
Don't shower in it. That was a long list.
Right.
Don't shower in it either. And so this is what I think, I come to Los Angeles, it's hard for me because I can't manage the shower coming out, the water coming out of the shower at my Airbnb. But chlorine can definitely be absorbed transdermally.
No question. I just proved it. Yeah.
Fluoride.
And anybody, by the way, can do that at home. I mean, if you're watching this podcast, I think the kit's $6 on Amazon. The chlorine drops. And you can actually take your tap water, put it on the counter, put 3 drops of this in, and the more yellow it becomes, the greater the presence of chlorine. And do it. Put 2 glasses side by side. Have somebody you don't like that much, put 4 fingers in there.
It's so crazy. This crazy shit. What about fluoride? I mean, fluoride transdermally? Do we know anything about this?
I don't know about fluoride transdermally. I mean, I'm sure it crosses the blood-brain barrier, but given the size of fluorosilicic acid, but regardless, we know that it's a neurotoxin. Right. And anything that's neurotoxic, even if there are safe levels, if I had a choice, if there were 2 pieces of tuna fish on a plate and one said, hey, this has a safe level of mercury in it, and this one has no mercury, probably go for the one with no mercury. This has a safe level of fluoride, but this one has no fluoride. I'll go for the one with no fluoride.
0 fluoride.
And, and you can, Huberman just did a big podcast on this. I thought it was really well done. And, he talked about hydroxyapatite and other things that we can do to remineralize the teeth. And stop the demineralization process. And I'm not even convinced that by drinking fluoride, it's not like you're sitting there and you're swishing with it anyway. So I don't know that you're getting the dental anti-decay benefits regardless. You're just putting a neurotoxin in your body.
Yeah. And I wanted to mention this. There's studies in rats that when they remove the fluoride, they see improvements in pineal calcification.
I could absolutely see that.
I don't think that that's been studied in humans, but there's this kind of meme that people think is just complete nonsense, that drinking fluoride in your water could lead to pineal calcification. And I don't know about studies in humans, but a lot of us do have pineal calcification, which may be a part of the normal aging process. Who knows? But it could also be related to toxins in our environment.
Right.
And at least in animal studies, when they decrease the amount of fluoride or remove the fluoride from the drinking water in rats and mice, they see decalcification of the pineal. How crazy is that?
We see an inverse relationship in a massive meta-analysis. I mean, this isn't my study. This is a National Toxicology Program. A massive meta-analysis. And the determination was that there was an inverse correlation between the amount of fluoride and IQ, especially in prepubescent teens. And listen, we're assaulting our kids with enough stuff already. The last thing they also need is an extra neurotoxin, to brush with, shower with, and to drink. And again, the cost of filtering your water, I mean, it's an upfront cost, but these filters, you change them maybe once a year and they last 10 years.
But a lot of things we're going to talk about on the podcast are upfront costs.
Yeah.
And I think that they are the best investments that we can make long-term.
Oh, amen.
As humans, we are so bad at long-term horizon judgments.
Mm-hmm.
We are thinking so much about what benefits me now. And is it this burrito that tastes good, but it has seed oils? We're just so bad at planning for the future.
Yeah.
I think, it's such an important thing. Life-changing. Check out this review on beef organs from Heart and Soil Supplements. This is wild, guys. Leslie says, I have suffered from chronic headaches for 25 plus years. Within a couple of weeks of taking beef organs from Heart and Soil Supplements, my headaches were a thing of the past. My energy levels were off the charts. I continue to be amazed at how much better I feel taking these supplements. How cool is that? And it's not really that surprising. A lot of us don't get all of the nutrients we need in our foods, which is why I built Heart and Soil. I'm so proud of this company. Grass-fed, grass-finished, regeneratively raised organs from New Zealand, freeze-dried for the ultimate nutrient preservation, packaged in glass because plastic is bullshit and microplastics are even more of a problem now than ever before. Check us out at heartandsoil.co. That's .co. Beef organs contains heart, liver, kidney, spleen, and pancreas, and I think of it as the ultimate multivitamin made from organs. So if you're struggling from any health condition, headaches, chronic headaches like Leslie, or anything else, getting more nutrients from organs could definitely be beneficial. Check us out, heartandsoil.co.
And I saw this a lot in the research that I used to do in the mortality space. When we would predict death, I was a mortality, expert for large life insurance policies. Mm-hmm. And we used big data and big data trends to predict the onset of, the severity of, and how quickly somebody would succumb to certain pathologies, certain diseases, what the likelihood was of them contracting certain conditions, and then the likelihood that they would succumb to it, which included a severity curve. But in that practice, what was astounding to me and really became glaringly obvious toward the tail end of my career was that the biggest reason why people are not living longer, healthier, happier, more fulfilling lives were modifiable risk factors. They were absolutely modifiable risk factors. By modifiable risk factors, I mean things that they could have easily changed in their diet, their lifestyle, their routines, their medications, their supplementation, the food supply, the drinking water. And there's an overwhelming body of evidence. And if you just look at big data on healthcare spending, I mean, the United States spends $4.5 trillion a year in healthcare. We're the largest spender by a huge margin worldwide. We're the leading spender on healthcare, but we're ranked 32nd in the world on life expectancy, 58th or 59th in healthcare delivery. We have the lowest, the lowest life expectancy at birth. We have one of the highest maternal mortality rates. We have one of the highest infant mortality rates. Even though we lead the world in colorectal cancer screening, we lead the world in breast cancer screening, we lead the world in flu vaccinations, and we lead the world in spending. And yet, we are so chronically ill. We have more comorbidities, meaning in the United States, there are more people. First of all, we also lead in obesity. So we're leading in a lot of areas. So we're killing it.
We're number one, bro.
we're killing it.
Go us.
But when you look at comorbidities, which are multiple chronic diseases, so hypertension, morbid obesity, diabetes, thyroid, all of these different what we call comorbidities, we lead the world in comorbidities, right? So we know that spending doesn't equate to outcomes, right? Because if it did, we would have the longest life expectancy, the lowest rates of obesity, the highest rates of healthcare delivery. We would have low infant mortality rates. We'd have low maternal mortality rates, and yet we don't. And so now I think people are waking up to the fact that they need to become citizen scientists, right? It's and it's not necessarily anti-big pharma or anti-modern medicine, because I think we would both agree that if we hit a windshield at 20 miles an hour, I want a surgeon, I want painkillers. I mean, I want it all, right? I want to go to good orthopedic. If I get pain in my chest and it starts to radiate down my arm, I'm going to the ER, right? But aside from the crisis intervention, right?
Exactly.
I'm not going to go to the third leading cause of death to prevent death, right? And by the way, there's modern medical error is the third leading cause of death, and that's not my opinion. That's the opinion of Harvard and Johns Hopkins, and looking at ICD-9 and ICD-10, ICD-11 codes in healthcare, and looking at how many times medical error leads to unnecessary death. So what I'm saying is that that's not where I'm going to go to get my advice on how to live longer.
I love it. I totally agree with you. That's why I don't really practice medicine anymore. That's why I left medicine. Yeah. I spent 2 decades of my life getting medical degrees and training in medicine, and I don't do it anymore because of this, because of this loss of my religion in medicine when I was doing it. So I totally agree with you. So this is really interesting because Western medicine, with all of those accolades, we're number one in obesity, we're number one in diabetes, go Western medicine.
Don't forget infant mortality rate and maternal death.
But look at what Western medicine recommends, right? We had this recent food compass come out from Tufts, good old Darius Mozaffarian.
Right.
Fruit Loops and frosted mini wheats are healthier than milk, meat, and eggs. Western medicine, Harvard will recommend canola oil. They'll recommend seed oils. They'll recommend 10 to 12 servings of whole grains per day, all these kind of things. And you think, okay, why is Western medicine so proud of what it's achieving when you really look at the stats, and Western medicine should be demoted to the minor leagues? It's not even a AAA player. It's definitely not major league player.
And you look at the size, I mean, it's a war machine. Diabetes is a $110 billion industry in the US. Wow. And so if you think that there's a meeting going on inside of some, big pharma boardroom to put that out of business, going, hey, how do we get this off the balance sheet? It's not happening. Right?
I've told this story before. I have a friend in the health space. He's in the tech health space. And he told me, and I could never reveal all the details, that he used to work at a big hospital. And he was in one of these meetings where at this big hospital, they were saying, we don't want to actually fix diabetes because that'll affect our bottom line.
Really?
Yes. Yes.
Well, it's yesterday. Was I in Orlando yesterday? Yes, I was in Orlando yesterday. I did an Access Hollywood event in Orlando. And so I came to the back of the theme park, and they walked me through Universal to get to the center of the theme park. And on my way there, I must have passed 20 dozen morbidly obese families. And some of them I would see grandmother, and if you don't believe me, go to Universal Studios, dude. It's hard not to say something. I wanted to be like, excuse me. But grandma's in a wheelchair, a little motorized. They give you the motorized one, and with a 2 liter of soda. And then, mom's, waddling behind grandma. And then there's a kid, I estimated he was probably 13 years old. The whole family had fanny packs on. And I was like, I asked the security guy that was walking me through the park. I was like, what's with all the fanny packs in here? Is it like a Disney thing? He goes, no, they can't put their hands in their pockets. I was like, whoa, it actually made sense. I'm like, dude, the kid's 13 years old and neither he or his mom can put their hands in their pockets. And then about 50 feet later, I run into this kid with his parents, and he's sitting on a bench. He has a 64-ounce Big Gulp in his hand, and he had a funnel cake it was on a paper plate, and you could see the oil coming through it.
Seed oils, not salad. This ain't a funnel cake made with butter.
And I told him on the way there, I'm like, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about how families can navigate the theme park. And we did. And ended up, I get goosebumps saying it, because I was like, this is the problem. I said, 64-ounce Big Gulp's got 38, 39 teaspoons of sugar in it. Then you got a funnel cake, which is basically, highly processed, bleached, fortified or enriched white flour, deep fried in very likely peanut oil or Wesson oil or canola oil, and then put on a plate with 10x sugar. And so that's got 44 grams of sugar. They're getting 38 teaspoons, 39 teaspoons of sugar in a 64-ounce Big Gulp, which is 4 or 5 full cans of soda. Nobody thought anything was wrong with that. And kids just sucking away on the soda and mashing down that. And he, I felt so bad for him because he was already morbidly obese. I'd estimate this kid was probably 13 years old. And so, I think the masses need this information, and there's guys like you and I out there, and there's all kinds of great guys out in the industry, Huberman and Peter Attia, and like all these great mentors that are espousing great information. But we have to somehow figure out a way to get the message to the masses, and maybe not focus on being such woke biohackers talking to other woke biohackers, because by the time you're considering photobiomodulation and sunlight and breath work, and NMN, you're already pretty woke to, what a mitochondria is. But I realized the paucity of just basic information that is out there for the masses. And it really hit me like a ton of bricks walking through Universal. I'm like, this is where the problem starts. If we don't fix the food, we'll never fix the pandemic of disease.
I wonder where it all starts, because I think that if you ask that 13-year-old that's obese, is this healthy food? Do you think this is good for you? Or you ask the parents, they'd probably get offended.
Yeah.
But do you think that they
don't
think
let me have soda that often?
Yeah. Do you think that they think this, maybe that's a treat because they're at Universal Studios? Mm-hmm. But when I think about that food, I think about calories, I think about macronutrients, and I think about essentially 0 micronutrients and 0 food information. This is so interesting to me because there's a lot of discordance that I see in the literature between a funnel cake, the granulated sugar on top of a funnel cake, and what happens when you eat fruit or honey. And there's so much more information in whole foods,
right?
Polyphenols or other compounds in the fruit that affect
better satiation responses.
Yes, that affect the way that the sugars are metabolized in the gut. But when we strip all those things away, and you have a processed sugar, you have a processed oil, you have processed flour. There's just the information is not complete. You're basically giving the body a program that's not complete. And it's no wonder that we get
highly inflammatory. It's carbonated, first of all. Yeah. So guess what's going to happen? First of all, the kid's going to fill up, and 45 minutes later, he's going to be hungry again.
Of course.
Right? Yeah. And then he's going to want a corn dog.
Which they've got.
They got those.
Also cooked in seed oils. Also, that's available for you. This might be part of the design.
Yeah. And so I agree with you. I think it's about the messaging. And I think that, with the agricultural revolution in general, was, I think, one of the worst things that ever happened to humanity from the standpoint of we didn't start to mass produce foods for nutritional content. We did them for profit. And it's also the way the healthcare industry is designed. When the people that are making medications that are in service to humanity have no fiduciary to the people that are taking those medications, they have a fiduciary to a shareholder who's an investor that's looking for a return. I think that the system is ass backwards, right?
Completely.
Because if I knew that you were making a chemical or a synthetic or pharmaceutical or food that I was going to feed my family, I would want to know that your interest is aligned with mine and my family's interest, but it's not. It's actually the polar opposite. By law, you don't have a fiduciary to me, even though you're making a product that I'm going to consume, a chemical I'm going to put in my body. You have a fiduciary, a legal obligation to which you could be sued for, to your shareholders, to your investors, to generate a return. So I think we're disoriented with how we incentivize big pharma, how we incentivize the food industry, because we're not in service to humanity. We're in service to and look, I own a for-profit company. I don't think there's anything wrong with producing a product or service and making a profit on it. But I think that when your fiduciary lies to someone other than the people that you report to serve, you have this disconnect.
Totally.
And I think that's where a lot of this comes from. I mean, I have an Amish farm right up the street from me called it's Healthy Food Choices, and it's called My Healthy Food Club. And I got raw dairy and kefir vegetables and A2 cheese and yogurts and grass-fed meats, and I got all kinds of stuff from them. They're pasture-raised eggs, and they're an Amish family. And week before last, they were raided by the feds.
Oh my God.
They sent out a letter and said, "Hey, we've been shut down. They destroyed all our food, and we're under investigation." And I was like, "Well, did somebody get sick? I mean, did somebody get a salmonella from the milk?" And they said, "No. No one got sick. They're saying that we're not properly licensed. We can't sell raw milk and raw dairy and raw cheese." And so they came in and destroyed it all. And I was like, well, damn, now I got to go find another place. But I felt so good
source.
On that stuff.
Yeah. The same thing happens here with a farm in Fresno called Raw Farm. So it's a raw farm. They make raw milk and raw cheese and raw kefir and raw cream. It's the biggest raw dairy farm in the world, according to them. They have like 1,000.
Where is it?
It's in Fresno.
Okay.
So it's in center of California. Yeah. I went up there and visited them. And a couple of funny stories about them. So they actually, there was a shutdown on their cheese. There was a recall recently here. They seem to be targeted, and all of their stuff is tested, and there's no salmonella anywhere. But they just get targeted by these things, and they get taken off the shelves, and they get shut down in California. You can't sell the stuff, and they do all the research, and they're like, this is completely corrupt. They're clearly just after us. There was no contamination of any of our things. It was another manufacturer, but we get pulled off the shelves.
Yeah.
They told me that I don't know if it's the FDA or maybe it might be the DEA, has shown up at their farm with like AR-15s.
Yeah, that's how they came in to this.
To the Amish farm.
Yeah, can you imagine you're like behind an oxen on a plow in the middle of the field?
This guy's coming in with freaking bulletproof vests. This is where our tax dollars are going.
Right.
I did a reel about the fact that there's a loophole, which I guess I don't want the loophole to go away, but there's a little bit of a loophole because Sprouts across the country sells, and this isn't really a loophole, it's just legal. Sprouts across the country can sell this raw pet kefir. So they sell from this farm, from Raw Farm, they can sell this raw pet kefir, and it's the same quality as the human kefir. They're not going to give the pets anything that is not for human consumption,
right? But
they can sell a pet kefir. And so Sprouts, even in states where raw milk is not legal.
This is awesome because I got a Sprouts right up the road from me.
Yeah, you can find a pet kefir, and it's labeled pet kefir. It says it on the label. And so every time I'm in a state where raw milk isn't legal, I'll go to Sprouts and drink the pet kefir and post about it. And just say, hey guys, like, this is safe for humans. I mean, Raw Farm isn't claiming that, but I'm telling you, it's pretty good.
Right.
And the FDA sent Raw Farm a notification. September 23rd, Paul Saladino drank your pet kefir. This is how closely organizations, small farms that make real food for humans that are consistent with where we've come from are being watched. It's crazy stuff.
It is astounding to me. And imagine if that kid that was sitting in Universal Studios was actually having like whole fat Greek yogurt and a fistful of blueberries and some raw honey, just as satiating. I started doing this.
More satiating.
Yeah, more satiating. And there is evidence that the nutritional density has a lot to do with the brain's satiation response. And so it doesn't get its nutrients, so it's saying, I need more food because you haven't fed me yet. And so we have a tendency to just dramatically overeat. And consume more calories. I actually did a podcast with from University of Southern California, Dr. Walter Longo. I just had a brain fart there for a second. Dr. Walter Longo, and he was talking about all of his studies and longevity and the impact of whole foods and simple things like cyclical fasting and the extension of mortality, and how overeating is one of the most detrimental things. Most people eat from 6:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, which I found astounding. And he said these dramatically prolonged, feeding windows, the constant snacking, never giving the body a break, never allowing for cellular autophagy or this senescence response where the immune system gets a chance to clean the blood is part of this parabolic, pandemic and chronic disease. Eating ourselves to death.
Interesting. I tried to get him on my podcast. He wouldn't come on and have a debate. I have some different views in Walter Longo, but that's for a separate podcast.
Yeah.
Let's talk about folic acid.
Okay.
And we can tie it back to cyanocobalamin because these are everywhere, man.
Yeah.
And I love that you brought this up on Rogan and brought attention to this.
And I get a lot of heat about that too.
I don't understand that. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, cyanocobalamin is hydrogen cyanide based B12.
Right. And cyanide is toxic to the mitochondria.
Yeah. And look, if you don't believe me, you can go right to the National Library of Medicine at the National Institute of Health. You can put cyanocobalamin in there. You can scroll down to section 5.3. It will say component compounds, and it will tell you right there cobalt. Well, cobalt is the cobalt metal that becomes cobalamin when you put it in the body. It's the part of the B12. A lot of people don't know that B12 is a metal. Like zinc, like magnesium. It's a necessary light metal. And then they bind it to something called hydrogen cyanide. And when I really went down the rabbit hole of this, again, I'm back to the dosage determines the poison. Yes, you can take small amounts of cyanocobalamin. You will not have a toxic reaction. But, cyanocobalamin's in our energy drinks. It's in our protein powders.
This is such an important concept.
Cumulative dose toxicity. And guess what the body does with cyanocobalamin? Converts it into hydroxycobalamin. So why not just give the body hydroxycobalamin? You're talking about a marginal increase in the cost of your supplements. And when I mean marginal, I mean a few dollars a month to buy a supplement that doesn't have folic acid, that has methylfolate, supplement that doesn't have cyanocobalamin, that has a methylated cobalamin in it. And definitely don't have to buy them from me. Methylated multi, there's a lot of great manufacturers that make methylated multivitamins. It's not a huge expense. And now you're giving it to your body in form that it can absorb and use and utilize. So think about what happens when we break the cobalt metal off, the cobalamin off. And now I have a floating hydrogen cyanide molecule. And the question is, where do we get the hydrogen cyanide? Like, how do we get the cobalt metal, we get the hydrogen cyanide, we stitch these things together. But where does the hydrogen cyanide comes from? Well, it's another industrial waste product. Only this is the industrial waste product from the processing of human sewage. And so in the processing of human sewage, you have a byproduct called sludge, which is the yellowy. I don't suggest you go to a human sewage treatment plant.
We'll put some B-roll in the podcast.
If you ever find yourself at one, you'll see hydrogen cyanide. It's the frothy, bubbly, yellowy stuff that they scrape off. So now if it's the waste from the treatment of human sewage, that's got to be like the bottom of the barrel, right? And then some scientist was like, you know what? If we take that, bind it to the cobalt metal, we can make cyanocobalamin. It's cheap. I'm using another industry's waste as my raw material, and bang, you've got your same thing with fluorosilicic acid becoming fluoride, and so figuring a way out of things by putting it back into human beings, to me, is like just mind numbing.
We've become the ultimate landfill.
Yeah.
Give it back to humans.
And it's sad because the average consumer doesn't have the wherewithal to evaluate these things. They go down a cereal aisle and you're like, well, this is fortified or enriched. So if I'm a mom or dad and I've got young kids and I'm like, well, this cereal's not fortified or enriched, but this one is. So now I'm taking an already bad product and I'm making it extra bad because now it's sprayed with the chemical folic acid. But because it's fortified or enriched, I think, this has extra B12 in it. It's cyanide-based B12. So, learning how to become a little bit of a citizen scientist, to be all the way to a woke biohacker, right? But a little bit of a citizen scientist and understanding that the closer that we get to the basics, the healthier we become. Grounding, sunlight, breath work, cold showers, clean water, whole foods, the healthier we become.
Forms of nutrients that are actually found in nature.
Yeah, exactly.
Cyanocobalamin, not found in nature.
No, not found in nature.
Folic acid. Talk about folic acid for a moment because this is a big one.
Yes.
And I just want to point out to people, read the labels on what you're doing because chances are you or someone in your family is taking a multivitamin that contains folic acid and cyanocobalamin, or you drink an energy drink that has both of those, these occur together, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If, your B12 supplement is likely cyanocobalamin. Your folic acid,
it's cheap.
Yep, your folate is likely folic acid. So you don't want cyanocobalamin, which means your energy drink, your cereal that's fortified, your supplements, your multivitamin. These all have these things. So folic acid.
Yeah. So folic acid, and it was even hard when I was designing my multivitamin. I wanted all methylated nutrients.
Right,
I didn't want folic acid. I wanted the methylfolate, 5-methylfolate. Certainly didn't want cyanocobalamin. I went the methyl form of B12 or the hydroxy or adenosylcobalamin form. Even my supplement manufacturers like, why do you want to do that? And, I can get you plant sterols. I can get cyanocobalamin. It's dirt cheap. It's damn near free. We can do the folic acid for a quarter of the price. And I'm like, it's not about the price. It's about the impact. It's about the bioavailability. And it's also about, helping people eliminate cellular waste. And they were like, not really sure what you're talking about. It's B12. But folic acid is a man-made compound, right? Folic acid does not occur anywhere naturally in nature. You can't find folic acid on the surface of the earth. Folate occurs naturally in nature. Folic acid doesn't. And we in 1993-ish, right around 1993, I believe it was Monsanto that convinced the federal government that we needed to spray our entire grain supply. All white flour, all white rice, all white bread, all white pasta, and grains of any kind with the chemical folic acid. And instead of saying sprayed with folic acid, they call it fortified or enriched. And that sounds great. Again, this is fortified, it's enriched. And you look at the incidence of attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, impulse control disorders. You look at the level of ADD and ADHD and irritability. Again, has there been a double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trial to prove this causal link? No, but you can use massive data analysis to see that when we introduced some of these things to the food supply, we had a parabolic rise in these conditions. And it's not detrimental to say, all right, I'm going to take a week off and I'm going to give my kids a week off from folic acid, because what's the standard American diet? What do I give my kid before they go to school in the morning? I give them a white bagel, I give them a Pop-Tart, I give them a bowl of cereal that's fortified or enriched. I give them a Flintstone vitamin with cyanocobalamin and folic acid. And then I noticed that 30 minutes after I give this to my kid, it's a full contact sport to get him in the car to go to school. And then the calls are coming home and the teacher's like, hey, Johnny's not paying attention. He's disruptive. He doesn't follow directions. He doesn't complete assignments. He's very impulsive. Maybe we should bring in the Ritalin to kind of help solve this. And
we've got a pill for this.
And what's amazing to me is that we're perfectly willing to break an operating system that has nothing wrong to fix the system that is broken. So, when kids' minds are very, very active, attention deficit disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the conventional wisdom is, okay, well, if the mind's racing, let's put an amphetamine into the body and let's race the central nervous system to match the pace of the mind. So let's take the system that's not broken, it's working fine. Let's break that one so that it can match the other one that's broken. It's literally like I heard somebody say, it's like, getting a flat tire and then getting out of your car and slashing your other 3 tires to create equilibrium.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, now they're all.
Let's do it, bro.
It's like, well, I just created equilibrium, but now I got 4 problems and not one. And we saw this in the mortality space too. The incidence of, like, for example, people would have chronic anemias and, the traditional treatment for anemias, and I would see this in the medical record, is, iron, B12, and folic acid. So that's the traditional treatment. They're throwing folic acid, cyanocobalamin, and iron into these people constantly. And you see it in the medical record. There's even a prescription strength of all of these. So you would see that the doc would switch it to the prescription strength. And now later in the medical record, you see they start to report that they're having bouts of anxiety. They're actually having bouts of heart palpitations. They're having severe issues with sleep. And that's when they bring in the trazodone or the Klonopin or the zolpidem nitrate, diazepam. So like, oh, we have something for the sleep. And if you actually, because we were in the mortality space, we would try to trace it back to the root cause. And we would say, what is the chance that this person will fix their anemia? And when they had chronic anemia, we began to understand that many of these folks had this genetic break called MTHFR, which is a very common gene break. And they had an issue processing folic acid. If you switch them to methylfolate and methylcobalamin and like an iron bisglycinate, the anemia would fix itself. And now anemia is one of those things, this is normally defined as low red blood cell count, low hemoglobin, but you can have anemia hiding in plain sight, right? When you look at CBC and you measure the red blood cell count, which goes from about 360 to about 580, and the hemoglobin, which is kind of like the fluid inside the red blood cell. I know you know this, but for people that don't, there's a range of red blood cell, there's a range of hemoglobin. So you can be in the lower 10 percentile for red blood cells, and your doctor's going to say you're fine. You can be in the lower 10 percentile for hemoglobin. The doctor's going to say you're fine. Your blood's really thin. Your hematocrit's really, really low. And so what's happening is your body is poorly transporting oxygen, and the more poorly we transport and deliver oxygen, the faster and the sicker we become. Anemia is one of those things, low red blood cell count, low oxygen levels, is one of those things that exacerbated nearly every form of disease that we studied. So if we added anemia as a comorbidity factor, we would accelerate the onset of and severity of nearly every condition that you had: obesity, type 2 diabetes, early onset dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, just the pace of progression. And yet a lot of these things are so easily fixable, right? It's fixable with diet.
This is why I stopped doing Western medicine, because I know you're doing a smoothie with Erewhon. Congrats on that.
Yeah, thank you.
I did a meet and greet at Erewhon this past weekend. I'm filming a documentary. Over 100 people came out to tell me their stories.
That's awesome.
And it's so cool when I'm in the States, because when I'm in Costa Rica, I kind of just see it digitally. It doesn't have the same impact on my Homo sapien brain that it does meeting person to person. But it's so cool to hear stories. And what I hear over and over and over is my eczema, my psoriasis, my depression, my anxiety, my obesity, my low libido, my insomnia, my inflammatory bowel disease. They all got better when I changed the quality of my diet.
Yeah.
When I just did things in my diet that my ancestors have been doing for hundreds of thousands of years.
Yeah.
And that question I always ask is, did your doctor ever tell you that could be a fix? And almost invariably, 98% of the time, the answer is no. Yeah. And that just drives me crazy. These fixes are simple.
You know what's really a blessing about the organization I've been blessed to be a part of is that our clinical team sees a lot of patients. We do about 20,000 of these new.
This is really cool. I wanted to talk to you about this big data that you're gathering with your health company.
And I want to I'm actually looking to publish it in a very major peer-reviewed journal, which I think will solidify a lot of what I've been preaching about the basics, folic acid, cyanocobalamin, methylated B vitamins, simple things. And we see, because we do thousands and thousands and thousands of these tests a month. We do about 20,000 gene tests a month. And I don't say that to say, well, we do 20,000 gene tests a month. I say that to mean that 20,000 human beings coming through this funnel where, in the most cases, we'll have blood work and a gene test, and we know specifically what supplements are taking. And then we have measurable outcomes, things like C-reactive protein, alkaline phosphatase, filtration rates in the kidney, glomerular filtration rates, the EGFR, markers like homocysteine. And then we have so those are objective, but then we have the subjective findings, which is what you're hearing about. I'm sleeping better. My libido's through the roof. I'm thinking more clearly. I've got the energy of 10 men. I'm chasing my wife around like a high schooler. All the things. Libido.
Libido is a vital sign.
Libido is a vital sign.
Like blood pressure, heart rate, fucking libido.
Yeah, I know. I love, hearing all, and I get similar stories where people made relatively small shifts and had dramatic changes, because if you think about it like spokes on a wheel, right? And you start to treat all of these things that we're facing as individual spokes on the wheel. It's like, well, I have weight gain, I have water retention, I have poor sleep, I have poor focus and concentration, I have no libido, I'm lethargic, my gut's a mess. You start to think the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket, but where does it all meet, right? Like what's the hub? The hub is your foundation of nutrition. And I think if you look at it in a broad sense, there's 72 minerals. I think depending on where you get your information from, 13 to 17 of these are considered essential minerals. We got 2 essential fatty acids. We need 8 essential amino acids. It's shocking to me how many people are deficient in just those basics. And, I always tell a story about when I was in grad school and I was getting my second degree in biology, which is I went to and got a second 4-year degree in human biology. And I wanted to take cadaver anatomy and gross anatomy, and I wanted to take pharmacology and all of these classes. But you have to spend some time studying plants, like morphology of thallophytes, and like, why am I learning about the damn life cycle of algae? Like, this is useless. But one of the things that really stood out to me was in plant biology, let's say that you have a palm tree and you got a leaf rotting in the palm tree, top of the palm tree. If you called a true arborist, like a true botanist out to your house, they would look at that rotting leaf and they wouldn't touch the leaf. They would core test the soil. And then they'd say, you know what, Paul, there's no nitrogen in this soil. And they would add nitrogen and the leaf would heal. And human beings are no different. Only we stop thinking about human physiology this way, where a nutrient deficiency could cause a pathology. What we want to do is we want to cut it, we want to spray poison on it, we want to trim it, skin it.
We repaint it. We just paint it green. Doctor's like, here's some green paint.
You could also paint it green.
Yeah.
See?
That's what
Paul Saladino is available to fix your palm trees, guys. He'll be in LA till Sunday.
I have all sorts of green paint.
He actually uses chlorophyll, natural green paint. But it really dawned on me, this is how plants heal, is how human beings heal. And I often think, I wish that before we thought that people were so pathological or so diseased because so many things were happening to them, I wish we would look within them to say, what's happening within them? What raw material could be missing that could cause this condition to happen? I mean, there have been journal articles published in major cardiovascular journals, showing that deficiencies in CoQ10 and folate and D3 have impacts on bone mineralization, have impacts on cardiovascular health. So there are snippets of it in the journals, but just not enough about the basics, right? I mean, if you got up in the morning and you put a little Celtic salt or Baja Gold salt in your drinking water, you made sure that your amino acids were covered, carnivore diet. And I think too, people have a misnomer around amino acids. We talk a lot about amino acids, but not realizing that, number one, they're not proteins, they're the building blocks of proteins, but that it's not just about muscle. I mean, every single cell in the body contains amino acids. We build our immune cells from it. We build our red blood cells from it. We make hemoglobin from it. We make neurotransmitters from amino acids. Tryptophan becomes serotonin. Phenylalanine and tyrosine become dopamine. So when you're deficient in these basics, could you, if you were deficient in an amino acid that was supposed to be turned into a neurotransmitter, could the deficiency in an amino acid lead to a deficiency in neurotransmitters, which form the basis of mood, which form the basis of our behavioral, the main drivers of behavior? And could you have behavioral consequences and mood consequences? So be diagnosed with a mood disorder or a behavioral disorder because you have an amino acid deficiency? Yes. We don't want it to be that simple, but it very well could be. And it very well is.
The synthesis of dopamine is iron dependent.
Yeah.
The synthesis of serotonin and melatonin or B6 and all, methylated forms of B vitamin dependent.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, it's here. I got to tell you about this. I'm super proud of the new baby in the family. Lineage Provisions is live. You can find us at lineageprovisions.com. What is this? This is grass-fed, grass-finished, regeneratively raised beef plus organs in a meat stick. I'm going to show you guys what these look like. That is our grass-fed meat stick with organs, really the only one of its kind on the planet. These are air dried, never heated above 78 degrees Fahrenheit. There's no lactic acid, no celery powder, because these are air dried, not cooked, no preservatives. It's beef, it's vinegar, it's liver, it's heart, it's salt, and it's a collagen casing on the outside, which you eat. So check us out at lineageprovisions.com. You're going to love them. The reviews are in. People are stoked about these. If we are out of stock, we've sold out a few times. There is a sign-up list to be notified when we'll be back in stock. But I hope you guys will check us out at lineageprovisions.com. Lots of good stuff coming from us in the future. This is just the first of many amazing products to assist you in your animal-based lifestyle. Super proud of what this company is going to accomplish. Find us at lineageprovisions.com. I've got a single nucleotide polymorphism in MTHFR. Mm-hmm. I've got 677C to T.
Okay. C677T and A1298C or just the C677T?
I'm homozygous.
Okay.
So I'm double negative.
Okay. So you're prone to anxiety.
Yeah, probably. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to talk about MTHFR for a minute and try and make it appreciable for people, because I really appreciate the way that you've brought methylation into the forefront of conversations and personalized nutrition. Methylation is complicated. I know with your gene test, you're testing a bunch of different acronym names. I'll just list them out for people if people get confused. It's complicated. Don't worry about it. But you've got MTHFR, MTRR. Those are all sort of in that methylation cascade.
Yep.
But let's just talk about MTHFR.
And another big one, COMT.
That's at the end.
Catechol O-methyltransferase.
And then I know you test AHCY also, but it's sort of a different space, like later on. But I just think of that sort of nexus of the methylation where homocysteine goes to methionine, and that's like MTHFR, MTR, and MTRR.
Yes.
And so it's interesting. And for me, I'll just say briefly, for me, I know that my homocysteine is 10 to 11.
Okay.
Unless I'm eating a lot of liver or taking a very small amount of L5 methylfolate.
I was just going to say, or taking methylfolate.
Or folinic acid, and which is the precursor to L5 methylfolate. So let's just talk about MTHFR so people know this. I think that getting a gene test is something that probably most people should do, because
I agree.
Not knowing about MTHFR specifically is important for people.
Yeah. And 44% or more of the population is estimated to have the MTHFR. It's a very common gene mutation.
Either heterozygous, either one or two copies
right.
at one of the two loci.
Yeah. So without getting too complicated, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase is it codes for the enzyme that makes this conversion. And there's two alleles on there, C677T, A1298C, and depending on which one is broken or whether you got it from both parents or one parent can depend on the severity of it, which is why some people say, well, MTHFR has absolutely no impact on physiology. And some say it has a major impact on physiology. I'm in the major impact category. And again, because this can lead to dramatic deficiencies in methylfolate, which is one of the main methylated nutrients in the human body. And you're correct in saying when I eat liver or supplement with methylfolate, my homocysteine is higher.
Lower.
Than well, when I supplement, it's lower than when I don't supplement, which is absolutely true. And we see this in massive data analyses. And we have had hordes of patients treated by the clinical team that have seen very severely elevated levels of homocysteine, a natural amino acid that we have in our blood. But remember, the human body is so incredibly intelligent. Like, it has strengthened my belief in God so much to continue to study human physiology, because there is no way that you're going to convince me that two bacteria banged 1 million years ago in a mud puddle, crawled out as a lizard and became an ape, and now somehow became a human being. Because if you look at the intelligence of how we use waste from one cellular transaction as a byproduct for another, right? Take a protein, we break it down into an amino acid. That amino acid feeds this transaction. This amino acid turns over and becomes a neurotransmitter, travels up the vagus nerve and creates mood and motion and behavior. And then that waste product goes into another methylated cycle. It is so incredible how efficient the body is.
It's incredibly elegant.
But it's incredibly elegant, and I think of methylation like a sandbag pass, meaning imagine you had like 10 guys in a line, and you're passing sandbags down the line. There's a guy that's taking sandbags off the truck, and he's supposed to take 10 off the truck, but he drops 4. Okay. Now the best the rest of the line can do is pass 6 sandbags, right? Even though there's nothing wrong with them. This is kind of how brakes work in the methylation cycle. So if MTHFR is broken and you are not supplementing for it, it can have a dramatic impact on the entire methylation cycle, because it's early in the methylation cycle. It's the guy closest to the truck. So now the other guys are passing the 6 sandbags. 2 guys later, that guy drops 4. Right? Now the best the rest of the line can do is pass the remaining 2. So what happens is when you have drop-offs in the methylation cycle, for lack of a better explanation, when you have deficiencies in the coding for these enzymes and you're deficient in these nutrients, it's not just that nutrient deficiency. It's the entire sequence of events that nutrient is used in.
It's huge.
Right? Which is why methylfolate, which it helps to take homocysteine, an amino acid, which can cause inflammation and narrow the arteries, turn it into methionine. Methionine actually can go up into the brain, and it can downregulate catecholamines, which are fight or flight neurotransmitters. So now you have gut issues, you got mild anxiety, you have interrupted sleep because your body tired but your mind awake. And can all of these things stem from nutrient deficiencies? Absolutely, they can stem from nutrient deficiencies. And my message to the world is, you're not as sick as you think you are. You're just deficient. And if you would go and hunt for the deficiency, like that botanist hunted for the nitrogen, you could fix the leaf. You could fix a lot of what we face as modern society. And these are not fancy, expensive solutions, right? I mean, we sell $120,000 light bed, but I say, you want to get it for free? Take your shirt off and expose your son to skin sunlight, right? We sell a $5,000 PMF mat. You want to do it for free? Take your shoes off, touch the surface of the earth. It's $5,000 for a hypermax oxygen system. Just do some breath work. Use your auxiliary muscles of respiration. Get air down into the lobes of your lungs. I wish that it was patentable, or you could charge people, because I think, or it was a prescription, because I think people would like give it more
credibility.
Yeah. They give it more credibility. But the truth is, the complexity is in the simplicity. When you actually give these raw materials, so now, you can't really fix the MTHFR gene mutation, but you can supplement for its function.
You sort of can. This is interesting, and this goes back to food. It's something I've talked about on my podcast. If you get enough riboflavin, like the study looked at 1.6 milligrams of riboflavin, which is more than the RDA, there's evidence that the MTHFR actually can go back to almost the native state, even with the 677C to T.
You mean you would test it and it would be negative?
No, the gene doesn't change,
that's what I meant.
but the homocysteine normalizes.
Yes, that's very
so
true.
it's probably an allosteric thing where the riboflavin affects the MTHFR enzyme and the activity of the MTHFR enzyme in a way that if you're getting enough riboflavin and you're getting enough folate, not folic acid, right? Methylfolate or dihydrofolate. Well, methylfolate is after the MTHFR, but you could get folate precursors that naturally occur in nature and riboflavin, which actually is an interesting B vitamin because it's very difficult to get enough riboflavin unless you eat heart and liver. Wow. It just doesn't occur. Yeah. It's not in muscle meat.
Or supplement,
Or supplement with riboflavin, but naturally occurring. So I love what you were saying. A lot of these things look complicated and you can biohack your way to PEMF and red light beds, all these things. But you can also go outside, take your shirt off in the sun, go in the ocean, and you can also eat whole foods that mimic what our ancestors would have done.
Yeah.
And so if you get liver with vitamin A and with folate that's naturally occurring and with enough riboflavin, liver and heart give people a lot of riboflavin. That's where we get most of it. You can actually kind of fix the MTHFR.
Yeah, you can. Well, I completely agree with you. I thought you meant go in and actually
no, not CRISPR.
Change it. Yeah, not CRISPR.
Not CRISPR.
Snip the gene out. But yeah. So I always say you can't fix the gene, but you can supplement for its function. Meaning you can take the deficiency out of the cycle, which is why some people are like, well, I don't get it, Gary. I have MTHFR and I have none of those symptoms. Well, and then I talk to them about their diet. I'm like, that's why. And then you have people that are crippled with MTHFR because they're packing folic acid in. They don't eat any meats. They're eating high amounts of grains. They're eating high amounts of cereals. They're eating high amounts of white flour, white rice,
full
white
of
bread,
folic acid,
white pasta.
But people don't even know.
Yeah, and these people notice that when they go to Europe, right, they're like, what's weird? I had a bowl of pasta in Italy and it was just pasta and tomatoes and basil and olive oil. I felt fine. And then I have the same thing here and I blow up like a tick and my mood crashes. And I'm like, it's all the folic acid that's doing it. Some people that think they have a gluten sensitivity actually have a folic acid sensitivity because, a lot of these foods are the same thing.
Totally possible. I just want to give people a word of caution about methylfolate. I've also taken too much.
Yeah. You don't want to over-methylate.
You have to be careful. So you got to work with somebody that knows what they're doing. You got to be checking your homocysteine. It's not a panacea, but when you get it right, it can be very powerful for people. And whether you get it right with diet, getting rid of the junk, or you get it right with like the right amount of methylfolate. Like I said in the beginning of the conversation, I've experimented with folinic acid. I've experimented with methylfolate. And when I get methylfolate, just as me personally, I get 1,000 micrograms, right? I get 1,000 micrograms. So like the smallest amount you can get, like most pills are like 15, 1,000 micrograms or 15
milligrams.
You
don't want that.
So much. And I'll take 1,000 micrograms and open the capsule and only do a third or a half.
Wow.
I'm very careful the way I titrate the methylfolate because I notice, and this probably has to do with my COMT, because my COMT is, I believe it's heterozygous. I did 23andMe. I know all of you conspiracy theorists are going to say that, China has my genetic data, and they probably do. But I wanted to know my genetic data because I did 23andMe.
What are they going to do to you in Costa Rica?
I don't know. But I think I'm heterozygous for COMT, and so I think my COMT is kind of slow.
Okay.
And so I think that if I take too much methylfolate, I don't feel good either. So it's a very complicated system down the line, right? And I'm redoing my my genetics while I'm in the States to make sure that my COMT is actually heterozygous. Just
Send
so I
it
can.
to me. I'd be happy.
Yeah. So I just know what's going on with all of it. But maybe just a couple words about catecholaminomethyltransferase before we wrap up.
Catecholaminomethyltransferase.
COMT.
So
methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase.
I know you have to say that. It's funny. I actually my whole staff one time we were in the we were having a staff meeting one morning, and I was like, we were talking about methylation. And I'm like, I put $100 on the table, and I was like, if anybody can tell me what MTHFR stands for. And one of my employees goes, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. I'm like, how did you know that? She goes, I knew you were going to ask that today, so I practiced it last night. Like,
you tipped her off, man.
I had to give her the $100. I'm like, but so COMT is catechol O-methyltransferase. And you know what's astounding is methylation is also called one carbon metabolism, a carbon and 3 hydrogens. In molecular biology, it really is astounding when you look at molecules and how very subtle changes dramatically change the impact of that molecule's action in the body. So by breaking off a methyl group, a carbon and 3 hydrogens, or adding a methyl group, you dramatically change the impact of neurotransmitters, of all kinds of things. Downregulate homocysteine, you metabolize other nutrients. And it's a very simple process, a very small process, if you will, but it has a dramatic impact in the body. So catechol O-methyltransferase is transferring a methyl group from the category of neurotransmitters known as catecholamines. And what are catecholamines? Well, these are fight or flight neurotransmitters, norepinephrine, ephedrine, dopamine, one of those we call adrenaline. And so when we have a fight or flight response, this is a dump of catecholamines. Pupils dilate, heart rate increases, hearing gets very acute, extremities flood with blood. You know, this is a protective mechanism, right? Sleeping in a cave, tiger walks in, I want a nice giant dump of catecholamines. But when I don't downregulate catecholamines, when I am a slow metabolizer, I have a slow COMT, that means I have high catecholamines. So I am a worrier. That's why they call them worriers and warriors. If you have fast COMT, you have very low catecholamines. You're not afraid of anything because thrills raise your catecholamine levels to a normal level. And that's why you have worriers and you have warriors. You've got guys that'll jump off a cliff in a squirrel suit, and then you got people that won't get on a commercial aircraft, right? And a lot of this has to do with this COMT gene mutation. Learning how to supplement to regulate this can massively change your life because COMT has a number of functions. One of them is it sends estrogen down the E2 pathway. If you actually look at a female hormone test called a Dutch test, and there's multiple Dutch tests, but it's a urine test. It looks at female hormone cycling. You will see COMT is right on there. Mm-hmm. It actually sends estrogen down a very specific pathway. So women can have estrogenic regulatory issues from having COMT. Most of the expression in COMT is a waking mind at night or consistent overthinking, worrying, laying down and constantly considering worst case scenario. If you know somebody who is constantly just goes to the worst case scenario, who lays down to go to bed at night and their environment quiets, but their mind wakes up, they're constantly overthinking things. And this is indicative of, not always, but it's indicative of COMT mutation.
It's powerful to look at the genes.
Yeah,
and
I love it. I'm going to dedicate the balance of my adult lifetime to it. I mean,
I love it.
I'm really, because, and the reason why I want to do that is because there's a solution. We call these genes actionable genes. And like we just talked about, it's not because we can fix the gene, but we can supplement for its function. And I think a lot of times when you look at a genetic test, you get paralysis of analysis, right? Because, if I pulled your whole genetic code, I could see you have olive skin, you have brown eyes, you have detached earlobes, brown hair. What am I going to do with that information? It's useless information from a treatment standpoint. Mm-hmm. So why not look at actionable information where we can actually correlate genetic deficiencies to nutrient deficiencies and correlate that nutrient deficiency to the expression of disease, right. The nitrogen missing in the soil.
It's so interesting. And I think that it sounds complex. I just want people to know that I think that what we're both suggesting is just start with the easy things. Go out in the sun.
Yep.
Put your bare feet on the ground. Whole animal foods.
Yep.
Right. If you do those things, if you eat organs, if you eat the way, and this sounds passe because I've been saying it for so long, but if we eat organs, if we eat meat, if we eat whole plant foods, if we eat the way our ancestors ate 150,000 years ago, we just do so much freaking better.
Amen.
You don't do pasta with folic acid. You don't do cyanocobalamin. You don't do industrial byproducts in your life. You don't drink water with fluoride. It's just, it's such an easy formula. Mm-hmm. But I really think, and this is a separate podcast that we'll have to do, there are industry actors that are just trying to confuse us.
Oh yeah.
And that there's so much
hit pieces come out of me all the time.
Really?
Yeah. There's a really good one in the Daily Mail.
Yeah.
Listeners want to go see it.
I mean, I was telling you the same the same newspapers do hit pieces on me. You don't need to drink raw milk when there's clear evidence that drinking raw milk as a kid has lower rates of asthma, eczema, and allergy.
Yeah.
Raw milk is no different nutritionally. There's a lot of confusing information for people in this space. I think of cacophony in terms of disparate voices. And I just want people to know that there's a clear formula and it's not complex and it's mostly things you're already doing. Just do them better or more ancestrally consistent ways. And people can get so much healthier. And that's just not something that Western medicine will tell people.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. And that's why it's so valuable what you're doing. And I so appreciate the work you're doing.
That's really kind of you.
With 10X and like the data set that you're gathering is so cool because there are detractors for both of us who won't come on our podcast to debate us easily.
We have some of the same detractors.
Yeah, we do. Of course
we're regular guests.
Yeah. And who will say, if there's not a human RCT about something, you can't talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Which to me is crazy because the amount of data that you're gathering, like thousands of anecdotes, tens of thousands of anecdotes, is valid. There's hundreds of people outlined at Erewhon telling me that changing their diet improved these things, but there's
tens of thousands of people. And that's one of the things I try to highlight. It's like results are really what matter, right? And we have thousands of them. And I try to, as much as possible, bring these people forward. Like, okay, yes, I make mistakes. I've said things on podcasts I regret. I've actually quoted articles in Not Science and gotten in trouble for it because I put it out there too early. And I was like, you know what, shit, there actually isn't any evidence that blending a banana increases your glycemic index more than eating a banana. I shouldn't have let that out before I actually really dug into it. But, and I make mistakes. It's not going to stop my mission. It's not going to stop my purpose or my passion. But I think instead of us trying to take hyper snippets of information and figure out where people are wrong, there's a lot of commonality in the messaging, coming from the right people that, diet, lifestyle, spiritual well-being, whole foods, clean water, sun exposure, grounding, breath work, cold showers, just these hormetic stressors and foundational nutritional hacks, if you will, really just changed the trajectory of so many lives, man. Like that kid that was sitting on the bench in Universal Studios when I went through sucking down the funnel cake in the Big Apple. It's like, man, he's so far removed, right? And again, we've got to remember that most of the world are not woke biohackers, right? They don't even know what methylene blue is.
It's true. It's true.
If you said
and
methylation.
I don't even love the idea of biohacking. It's so simple, right? Just do what your ancestors did. Yeah. And I don't think either Gary or I are woke. So just so you guys,
I hate that term woke, but we're in LA, so I had to use it. Yeah. I really hate that term.
There's no politics here.
No.
There's no political. There's no political insinuation there.
No politics.
But man, I wish we had a couple more hours. But
so do I.
It's been great talking to you. Appreciate what you do.
Amazing.
And I hope we get to hang out more in the future. I hope you'll come to Costa Rica.
I will.
Thank you, brother.
See you.